Nope, just burn the podcast, delete it completely. Let's start over. Hi, I'm William Duell.
This is Entervoid.com's VCast. Entervoid is the world's premier comics battling website. It's a place for artists of all skill levels who love comics to hone their skills through competition and collaboration. Check us out at Entervoid.com. This episode was recorded on...
Arr, mateys, and welcome to the Void Pirate VCast. Today I am joined by ArtsandGoodies.
Hello. I'm surprised you didn't say Arts and Goodies. You missed your chance.
ArtsandGoodies. I'll fix it in post. And we're also joined by William Duell.
Yo, oh.
And last but not least, we have yarnwitch.
I was actually born on Talk Like a Pirate Day.
So today on the Pirate VCast, since Pyrus is out of town, we've decided to hijack the podcast and do our own. We will be discussing what makes a good critique and reviewing all of the comics that are up this week. So we've got our work cut out for us. So what do you guys think makes a good critique on Void?
One of the important parts for critique is the sandwich method, where you start with something good, have most of the critiques or stuff you want to see improved in the middle, and then end with encouragement. That format is super important because it'll make people more receptive to when they have more information that they need to improve. And also, another part of a good critique is just making sure to fully explain yourself and offer alternatives that they could do in about the same time.
So some people often feel like, they don't have the technical level to critique. And to some degree, it makes sense. Critiquing itself is like a skill. But art is never a finished product. You could spend 100 hours on one comic page or just an hour, and how finished it is depends on you. So you as the reader can always offer more suggestions, alternatives, because even when you're a consumer, when you're going to the store and you're buying a comic, there's a reason why you choose one over the other. So you're basically saying, why did you like this one? Why would you have bought this one in a store versus another one?
Right, and personally, I don't use sandwich method per se, but I like to be like, this works and this doesn't, and here are things that you might be able to make it work. And if you don't know why something is off, that's okay to say too, I don't understand why this isn't jiving too well with me, but I thought I'd measure it out. But don't be like, that's bad.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain degree of reading comics that comes down to your personal opinion. So it's important to point out your thoughts and what you think could be improved. And it's also important for the artist to be able to say, okay, this is something I'd like to implement. This is something that just doesn't work for my art style. And it's okay for people to like or dislike it, or to think that things need to be a certain way and you just prefer it a different way.
Yeah, there's a lot of preference and subjectivity in art. So at times there'll be different critiques that'll say, one will say they don't like the way that thing works. The other says they like the way that thing works and want to see it more extreme in that direction. So it's up to the artist to pick and choose, and also to realize critiques are meant to help improve the artist, and we all want each other to improve. The best critiques are the ones that keep that in mind and make sure the sole person that this critique is directed at is the one who gets improvement from it.
One other thing that is interesting too is critique when it comes to style versus technical. It's much easier to point out on a technical level what's off. You're always going to get the critique of, hey, this anatomy is not quite right, because it'll take you hundreds of hours to really get to that level. But that's an easy thing to point out. But style is a way harder and much more subjective thing to talk about, because that really does come down to your personal preference and the artist's preference as well.
Yeah.
If people are still struggling with it, there are some really good threads in the forum, which people should be using more. If you search I'd comment, but there's a fantastic thread that's actually been stickied by Red, and the thread was by Jetster, just about giving crit. It links another thread that talks about giving crit. It's all really good information, especially if anybody is struggling with it. There is a lot of stuff that's easier to glean from there than to hear us go around in circles about it.
Also, now that we're doing the Crit Club, part of the Crit Club, along with making sure that all the comics get good critiques, is also helping people get better at critiques. And if you have any issues with critiques, feel free to hit the Crit Club up and ask advice on how to critique, because we can critique critiques.
Yes.
Because critiquing is a skill.
Yeah. So why do we even have a crit club?
Over the past few months, and like, granted, I've only been here for a little over a year now.
I've been here less than a year.
Oh my god, it's been 2 years. Anyway, in the time that I've been here, it's gone from relatively active, and even then, it's my understanding that it used to be more active before that. People aren't getting some of the feedback that they need, and a lot of the comments nowadays, which, like, this is not a criticism against them, are just, this is great and I love this, which is fantastic. That makes people feel really good when they hear that. But for people like myself who are trying to push to improve, I need something a little bit more than that. And I know there's a bunch of other people who have the same sentiment, so we kind of put this together to make sure that people can get some of the information that they need, especially since we need more comments. Hopefully this will encourage that.
Also, real quick, those comments are good, and it's better to do one of those comments than no comment.
Yes.
So if you can't come up with a critique, at least make one of those comments, because specifically for the newer artists, I've had to do the struggle of going around the Discord asking people to vote and crit on the stuff and not get a whole bunch, because the best comics are the ones that get the most comments, which sort of makes sense, but also the newer, more amateur artists are the ones who need more comments because they're the ones who generally need the help more or more direction.
Right, so even if your favorite is up on the site, maybe you can help somebody become your new favorite,
Yeah, that's important too. Like, you don't just have to write a detailed crit. Just talk about what you liked. Like, hey, even if it's just one panel, be like, hey, I really like that one cool panel, that one expression. Artists want that validation and feedback. And there's really two types of people on the site. Those who want hardcore improvement and those who just want to have fun. And both of them want to hear comments.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we remember that even though most of our interactions tend to happen on Discord now, just because it's a more convenient option, it's still really important to leave, especially critiques, on the comics themselves, because those are things people are going to want to go back and refer to in the future. It's also really good if there are compliments there. It's a way to go back and say, oh, hey, people liked this comic. So it's really important to leave those more permanent notes on people's comic. And hopefully the Crit Club can help set a good example with that. If people want to join the Crit Club, how do they do that?
Pinging the Crit Club tag should get you in contact with the people you need to be. I think most anybody that's on staff right now can help add to Crit Club.
Also, being in Crit Club is a bit of a commitment to make sure that you'll do critiques and comments for the comics on the site, just to make sure everyone does get the critiques they need. You can also add the Crit Club in the Discord if you need advice on something like color schemes, or if you need a different composition for a panel. If you have something in an art show you want advice on, you can add the Crit Club.
Well, I'm excited to see how the Crit Club goes forward, and hopefully it sets a good example for the rest of the community so that we're all participating more actively.
Yay!
Because activity is good.
So let's jump into our comics. So the first one we have is Cutie Mark versus Smee and Lee. We'll start with Smee and Lee's side. Cutie Mark lies passed out on the floor, surrounded by booze, drugs, and other remnants of his latest rager. He wakes up to the pokes and prods of Smee and Lee, the janitorial slime twins, who have come to clean up Mark's latest mess. Concerned for Mark's well-being, the sisters question his motives for staying in limbo rather than finding rest in the afterlife. They recall the time they were alone, before Smiley became Smee and Lee, and how Mark's parties are only short respites from the eternal loneliness he must endure. Mark insists that he has no need for closure or a satisfying end to his life, and the girls leave him to continuing his party in limbo.
Okay, so like all of other Raji's comics, I really like the art in it, and particularly the muted color palette, as well as it looks like there's some sort of texture that he did for the colors. It makes it look all, I guess, watercolory. It makes it all gross and muted in the right kind of way for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the tone, I don't know Smee and Lee enough, so their extremely concerned attitude, the way they acted in this seemed a little weird to me, but that's just because I don't know that character enough. They seemed a lot more mature than they were acting in previous comics.
So you feel like the characterization isn't consistent?
Yeah, but I've only seen the recent Smee and Lee stuff and not the stuff before they died, since this is originally started in October, so both the dead characters got to battle. So I don't know the older stuff, but the characterization seems pretty different than the other recent Smee and Lee comic.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one a lot. Like, all kind of like Raji's recent comics have been like pretty short like this. So I always feel like I kind of want a little more. But that's a good thing that I'm like left kind of wanting more, because it means that I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the art. I do feel that on the last 2 pages, Raji kind of traded in mood for backgrounds. They have some good stuff going on in the first 2 pages, but a lot of close-ups. But I do enjoy the details of the first few pages, and I think they're pretty strong. On the 4th page, I think that last panel is really funny, where he's going, I never had sex with a slime before. He's got that expression going with the green smoke. That's a pretty funny panel, but it does look weird too, because in the first panel on the same page, we also have a side view, and like it's a little bit inconsistent there as well, but it's still a pretty funny panel.
I'm generally a fan of Raji's stuff overall, so there's some neat organic feeling to it that sometimes gets lost in digital, and I think it's because, like, when I had the opportunity to work with him during the Love Child tournament, I realized a lot of his stuff is actually traditional that's been moved over to digital, and it's really neat to see how it all goes, and that's why it kind of doesn't end up feeling sterile after everything.
I didn't know that. So does he, like, sketch and ink traditional, or does he just pencil it and then ink it digitally?
It depends on, like, what is being done, and of course I think it varies from comic to comic. I know with ours it was a pen that was scanned, converted to lines, and then was colored digitally.
Well, there aren't a lot of effects in this one. I've noticed that Raji's been getting better at fitting his digital, really his typographic effects and sound effects with the art of his comic, because that was an early problem he used to have. Though this one doesn't really have too many examples of that, none that I can see anyways.
Yeah, it has a really nice somber mood to it, though. It's just, you're definitely right about the mood. I don't know. I appreciate how serious it is.
Yeah, and the color palette, like I said before, really sells the gross after-partiness of the situation.
The one thing I would have liked is, I'm not sure what the sort of penalty for Cutie Mark is at the end here. Like, is he just going to be stuck with this empty, like, partying lifestyle, and that's the bad thing at the end of this comic? Because Smee and Lee are basically going, like, we'll never see you again, like, please think about moving on. And he's kind of like, I'm not going to change. So I'm not quite sure what the negative is to him staying in this purgatory life that he seems to be okay with.
Well, I mean, he's only okay with it right now, but it seemed that, like, even as me and Lee were telling him about that, he's like, I'm just gonna light up this joint and smoke because I don't want to listen to what you say. I need this escape. I need this, I don't know, whatever he's using it for.
Yeah, like, it's a superficial okay, where they're not actually okay with it, but they're in denial.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the philosophy of this comic. It's this discussion between just partying all the time and being okay with that, versus, I guess, addressing the loneliness that Mark is in, and that it's better to find some sort of resolution and move on instead of just being stuck in one place. And I like that Raji kind of leaves it open-ended. Like, Smee and Lee obviously feel like Mark is making the wrong decision here, but he insists that he's fine with his decision and that he doesn't need this sort of resolution, and that partying is just fine for him. And I like that. It makes it really thought-provoking. I agree that the color scheme works really well to make things look really gross where they're supposed to be gross. And also, I love that texture. I'm going to have to ask Raji how he gets his textures.
Yeah, I want to know how that was done.
We all want the texture.
Give us the texture, Raji.
We need the crunch.
Okay, let's move on to Mildred versus Duana Donut. We'll start with Nothing's side. Duana Donut is proud of her fame, but just being a popular mascot isn't enough. Seeking any means of gaining mass fame, Donna seeks the help of a demon from beyond the grave. Mildred appears and asks for a vessel in exchange for its demonic favor. Joanna, in a cold sweat, asks what happens if she doesn't have a vessel prepared. Upon being told, your body is forfeit, Joanna rushes to her junk box, desperate to find a container for Mildred that is not her own body. Just as she's about to be overtaken by the demon, Joanna begs Mildred not to take her, extending an object out of panel. The object is revealed to be a doll, and Joanna's wish not to be taken by Mildred is considered her favor, leaving her with nothing but a possessed doll.
So, small aside, I just realized Duana Donut is slightly a play on words, because I think it's pronounced Duana, because do you want a donut?
Oh my god.
Duana. Oh no! Is that right?
I think that's how it is. I
Mr.
think that's
PR
why.
Confirm.
Mr. PR
confirm.
Mr. PR has to tell us, but I think that's what it is. Do you want a donut?
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Oh
We've uncovered the secret here. This
You heard
is
it
kind of like the
first.
time I discovered that some of this was actually a play on words.
Oh my gosh! Is it? Oh my! I just what? Where have I
How
been?
many word characters' names are puns?
Yeah, I was like, Somatis. Wow, that's cool. And you're like, Somatis. I'm like, oh no, 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 no. My brain is melting out of my ear.
So, to go on to the actual crit of the comic, well, I like Nutton's style in general, like their inks and just the way they do the characterization of all the characters I tend to like. In terms of the story, I'm not quite sure like about the end result of it, so she's just trying to get a famed servant, I think, and then it ends up just being in the doll and ends up not doing anything. Because I'm just not sure how it's a waste of a wish or a pact.
So my understanding is that Doana here, if that's how we say it, that she wants to be famous, and she's summoning this demon. But this story is basically an origin story for Mildred the doll.
Okay.
Honestly, thinking back to a lot of Mildred comics are kind of unfinished, so I don't have a real sense of what sort of character Mildred is. But this is interesting because we finally kind of get an origin for it.
Yeah, it is actually interesting, the origin. Though I feel like there should be like maybe a page more just showing that Joanna throws the doll out and it like moves or something. That wouldn't even necessarily need to be a page, but like maybe a panel or two where she like throws the doll away. Or maybe something like that, I'm not sure.
So maybe we need like a follow-up to the events of this comic, because does Doana become famous? She does fulfill the contract.
I just realized that on page 1 that Joanna stabs herself, but she's a donut, so is that jelly?
I think that's jelly.
Totally what that is. Oh my god, that's amazing.
It's interesting to me that this comic is a lot looser than Nothing's usual style.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's neat because they got a lot of interesting movement. The way that they do expressions comes in a lot clearer here because they're being more free with their art.
Yeah, which I get that. They're being more expressive because they're loose.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that the reason that they chose this loose style is kind of because they probably like ran out of time a little bit, which is why this comic has a sort of an incomplete feel to this. But at the same time, this loose style is appealing. So I kind of like what they were able to do. It kind of reminds me of those Pop-Tart commercials.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember that. Which I know they were ripping off another artist.
Yeah,
That's a whole different.
I see that.
All right, good job, Nathan. Good job in finishing this comic and giving us something to chew on.
Yeah.
Let's jump to Doana Donut's side.
You want a donut?
I can't believe that.
Finally broke the code only after they like died a couple. How long was the sudden death tournament? Like, I was like 8 months ago now.
Wow, it was a while.
Oh,
Yep.
Time is an illusion.
All right. After a long day of work, Doana is about to settle in at home when her doorbell rings. Instead of the interview she was expecting, she opens the door to find a gift containing an old doll. Doana throws the gross toy in the garbage, only for it to reappear on the counter as she searches the fridge for an evening snack. She throws the doll out again, assuming it was a prank and that the pranksters must be gone by now. She takes a relaxing bath, her frosting melting off along with her discomfort. But as she looks for the shampoo, Mildred appears once again, shampoo in hand. After several more failed attempts at getting rid of the creepy haunted doll, Doana breaks down and shouts for the doll to tell her what it wants. The doll animates, knocking away Doana's gun and grappling her with its hair. The scene cuts to black, and as the comic resumes, it is revealed that the doll simply got the wrong address and meant to haunt a house further down the block. Doana is safe, but her house is a wreck.
So I like the premise of it. I also like Mr. PR did a lot more establishing or just far out shots than he's been doing in his previous comics, which is one of the crits he gets a bunch. So it's really good job on you, Mr. PR, for doing more of them. I was trying to go through the comic to count how many of those there were this one, because there's definitely more than in the usual comic. So good on you for that. I also like the story of it, and just keep working on doing more of those shots and working more on improving the backgrounds. And I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I like the work that Mr. PR has been doing with Doana Donut in a lot of the recent comics. That they've been like funny and entertaining. I was thinking about that last one they did where they kept trying to escape from Dr. Freakenstyle. So yes, I also enjoyed it, and I agree with Arts that the backgrounds need a little more work, and that's practicing perspective. just keep in mind that not everything has to be facing us. Everything should end at least on a point, especially like I'm looking at this first page and it's kind of a 1 point perspective shot, but not everything is on the same plane. So it's stuff like that probably be best practice. But they did do a lot of neat stuff. Like the bottom one, they try to do a curved perspective. So I like that they're still attempting new and different things and that the comic is varied enough. The comic also does bring up a lot of weird questions to me. Like, Doana Donut, what kind of bath are they taking? Are they a wet donut now? And what do they use shampoo for? Like, they don't have hair. So what is the shampoo for?
Maybe that's the joke.
On the line of those questions, I need to know, with further clarity, in her kitchen there is it's either artwork or a photo of a bowl of donuts, possibly, or bagels. And I just need to know.
That's probably a family photo.
In her kitchen? You put a family photo in your kitchen?
Maybe Doana does. Or maybe Doana just needs to eat like round donut-shaped things, bagels, donuts. That's how they keep their shape.
I just don't know.
There's a lot of questions about Doana's physiology that we will need answered someday.
But that's part of the fun absurdism of Doana.
Yeah.
Although I do firmly believe that she's bathing in milk because she immediately goes to the kitchen to get milk, and then right after that we have the scene with her in the bathtub, so I'm pretty sure she's bathing in milk.
Oh my god.
I was thinking maybe it's like a fryer.
That's also good. But we do have the image of the shower head. What is that?
True.
Yeah, and there's also something I wonder about Mr. PR Style, because like all the lines in this comic are very thick, and there's no variation on lines, and I think it would help if they did change their line width a little. For example, on the very last page, like those cracks are like really thick, and if they had been a little thinner, that probably could have like hammered the point in a little
One
more.
quick question, since I also have the same issue. What are good ways to adjust your line width? Like on a technical level, through a program. How does one adjust line width?
If you're using a tablet, you can choose any brush and have it go up to a large size, as long as it's not minimum brush size is almost the full size of whatever you're putting down. That would give you really consistent lines, which is good for some styles. Want that line variation? You'll need to set your minimum brush size settings to somewhere relatively low, like not 0, or maybe 0. I mean, like most of mine will let me do 0. That way I can hover the pen over top and sometimes get nothing, so I'll get interesting line breaks and I can go back into some.
Yeah, I think also becoming familiar with your chosen program's shortcuts for changing brush size is really important. In Clip Studio Paint on my iPad, I have shortcuts saved to change brush size that I use all the time.
And also, like those programs like Photoshop and Clip Studio Art, people make brushes of different sizes and varieties and hardnesses and thicknesses. So those are things you can find, download, play around with. It's something you have to kind of hunt down and work on.
Now, for what it's worth, there is some line variation, and I can tell even on the individual strokes that they taper at the end, things like that. So they are not putting full pressure down every time that they draw, but it might just be that they're a bit heavy-handed, and that's why it turns out.
Yeah.
But it's good to explain this stuff, because I remember when doing my intro comic, I think it was only on my third attempt, I realized that pen pressure was actually a thing I had to turn on, and it wasn't on.
Oh, I bet that was difficult.
That makes a difference.
Yeah, it makes quite a difference when pen pressure is not a thing.
Yes, it does.
I think it's good. I think Mr. PR has a really good sense of humor. Like, his punchlines are fantastic.
I've been loving the humor in all his comics recently.
Yeah, I as well.
He has been doing this, I guess it's developing this formula thing, which is interesting. I'm curious to see where it takes.
My main critiques with this, I also super love Mr. PR's sense of humor. Every comic he makes is always a pleasure to read, because I never quite know what he's going to do, but he's always got that signature Mr. PR style, and I really love that. I do think that you can pay a little more attention to your speech bubbles, giving them some room to breathe. So right now the text is almost right up against the bubble's border, and giving it, maybe a half letter's width around at least would help a lot. Just make it feel a little less claustrophobic. I also think that I like that you've been playing around with different perspectives and, zooming in and out more on your characters. I do still feel a little bit that you're getting a little bit too close to your characters in most panels. And just backing out just like a tiny bit would help make the panels themselves feel less claustrophobic and feel less like you ran out of space for your character and more like you intended it to be this distance from them, if that makes sense. And I think that's something really common that almost all artists on Void do. So anyone who's listening out there, I encourage you to take a look at your panels and maybe zoom out just like 5%, no matter how close the panel is supposed to be, unless it's like an extreme close-up, in which case you probably already are on top of that. But other than that, this comic was just really funny. I didn't see the ending coming. I thought that was a really fun twist, and I just look forward for more of your work going forward. So with that, let's move on to Steph versus Cutie Mark. We'll start with Steph's side. Steph goes out for a drink at a local bar. The bar is lame, but at least there's alcohol. She orders a mojito and a couple of vodka shots, only to be challenged by Cutie Mark saying her drinks are weak and calling her a normie. Steph challenges Mark to a drink-off, knowing her limit is off the charts, and Mark heartily accepts. The two proceed to drink the night away.
I'm looking at the ending, and at first I felt like there could be more, but I kind of like the way it ends. Right now, like, looking at it more, I like the ending with all the messy, like, bottles and alcohol, and then they just go on to do their own things, because Nothing said that in the comments that this was before SDT, so they basically both drink the night away before they proceed to get killed.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I kind of like this ending, actually. At first I didn't like it, but it's warmed up to me with just what's left is the alcohol, since they're both technically dead characters. So I'm putting a lot of thought into that, but I like that ending. Also, in general, I like Nothing's style, the way they do their characters. There's something about it that I just find enjoyable. Critique-wise, I guess, it's the same 3 panels for all of it, so some more panel variety would have been nice, is the main thing I could think of as a critique right now.
Yeah, so it makes an interesting contrast with the Doana comic because, you chose a different color palette. This one's all greenish, the other one's purple, so they make a nice complement to each other. But this one, I am less enthused about how loose it is compared to the Doana one, because I probably feel like there's more expressions there, and Steph, while they have a lot of expressions here, don't have quite that much variety. So like the Doana one had much more like fun expressions, and Mark is kind of a little bit plain. Like we don't even get to see his like horsey bottom, which I feel like you intentionally left out the horsey bottom so you wouldn't have to draw it. But the story itself is fine. I think the story's fine. I like Art's interpretation. Now that he's added that makes it even more interesting. And beyond that, I don't think there's a lot more to say, except I feel like your text is too large. The balloons in the text could be a little bit smaller. Like, I don't know what geriatric person is going to read this, or that you're intending to have them read it so that they can see the words.
Maybe they're reading it on a really small phone.
Yeah, I read almost all of the comics on mobile, and I found this to be like significantly more readable than a lot.
Right. That's mostly what I have to say. I feel like the Doana comic was stronger than this one, but this was an alright showing for what it was.
It's nice. It's just another interaction comic on Voids. Pretty good. There's a lot more intersecting lines in this one than in the other one, so I think this one was done after the Mildred comic in pacing. A lot of the bottles and glasses and stuff, you can check the bottoms and they'll be like extending lines beyond the actual form of the thing. You can see like the shirts and sleeves and things like that will intersect with the bar top. Nothing's been kind of a beast lately, like finishing multiple comics within the same timeline, so like...
Yeah, Nothing's been pumping out a bunch of comics recently.
Yeah, I also happen to really enjoy that really confident kind of smirk face that Mark has going on the bottom of page 3.
Yeah.
So that one just kind of gets me.
That's a really good expression. I like that.
Yeah, I really enjoy that one.
I think that expression is a really good example. Even though it's a little bit loose compared to most of Nothing's work, it's a really good example of where they shine as far as expressions go.
Absolutely.
I feel like there's something very like open and almost bouncy about their art style that makes all of their character designs just really fun to look at.
I think that's what I like about their art style.
Yeah, and like so where normally I personally would think that like, and I think it's just because I'm a whiny trad artist, that that digital comics tend to come off as sterile to me. I don't feel that way about Nothing's work at all. I think it's very lively. I don't know how they manage it. It's witchcraft.
I also want to point out that like when I first was reading this, I thought this was actually Bobo's comic because you guys have characters that are very similar.
Steph and Sludge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Nothing decided to make them, I think, cousins.
Yeah, cousins.
I should know this off the top of my head. The difference is Steph has a big curly fro, and Sludge has
Has
more
the
of a...
smaller hair.
Yeah, Sludge has small hair. It's a bright day as Snappy begins his new job at Super Grocery. He daydreams about what it would be like to have a girlfriend, only to have his thoughts cut short by a cart full of eggs knocking him out. After months in the hospital, unexpectedly failing to recover from a simple accident, Snappy's doctor decides it's time to cure this sicko once and for all. Snappy wakes up to the sounds of his physician calling him weak for succumbing to something so small as eggs, and his brain snaps in rage. As if by instinct, Snappy summons eggs to assault the offending doctor. As battle ensues, he discovers the magnificent power and beauty of the eggs that have come to his aid. He turns the doctor's eyes into fried eggs, and he too sees the beautiful dancing eggs with butts. Now unable to defend himself because of his sunny-side-up eyes, the physician falls victim to the first eggification. As Snappy celebrates his victory, one of his eggs poops out a special outfit tailored perfectly to the man's proportions. And that's how Snappy became the egg dealer.
I love the egg dealer so much.
It's so absurd and so great.
I love him.
Can you handle it?
No. I need to mute myself. Seriously.
He's gonna explode in like a second. Like
He's
she could do
gonna
a whole
explode.
podcast about the egg dealer.
I'm gonna explode, yes.
You're gonna explode. So while Yarn's exploding, I'll start. The first thing I just want to mention is that, how do you pronounce egg dealer artist's name? Bog?
Bookie Dibsto is how I do it.
Okay. Well, she has been doing great stuff with all her comics, and in particular, I just remember some of the stuff I've been offering for critiques, like doing fonts, potentially multiple fonts. They did that, where the doctor has a different font from Egg Dealer, and just stuff like the other people actually putting up a fight, which the doctor does. So Bogdy's just been doing great improvement, and 17 pages is a lot. This one, Beyond Battle, is as many pages as I've done in my year here in my own battles. So just to put that in perspective, that's super awesome. And the one critique thing is to go even further in terms of ridiculousness. And in the ways I can see that is mainly because I've just been, there's like certain anime like JoJo's and Baki where they just have these over the top ridiculous techniques. And I kind of want to see you try, I'm speaking to Bogdy, to try and like do one of those things with just a ridiculous explanation for a ridiculous attack. But even without that, pushing even further the ridiculous of their characters. Like on page 10, when the doctor says, "That's right, I'm pretty damn strong," I was thinking like maybe something like, "My student loans make me stronger than you could possibly imagine."
My student debt is over 9,000.
Oh no.
No.
Just stuff like that. And also, if you haven't, just because I love both of them, read and watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Baki just to see some ridiculous stuff to get potential ideas. And also, I want to see more like background shots and also working to make weird, completely weird, nonsensical structures as ridiculous as your characters. I want to see that.
I kind of suspect that the artist already is familiar with JoJo and Baki. I don't know about Baki, but I feel that there is some very strong JoJo references. And well, when the Egg Dealer was first coming to Void, that was actually what a lot of us were wondering. We're like, there's some very JoJo-ish qualities to the Egg Dealer. What's interesting also to me is they're sneaking in some of their other characters here, the cameos, because the really obese guy with the like super beautiful girlfriend, like I know those are other characters that the artist had that they were trying to, originally that's who they were trying to introduce into Void before it was suggested that they go with the Egg Dealer, who himself is a very interesting character.
Yeah, I thought I recognized them.
Yeah, I remember that from their incubator thread.
So their appearance is not just like random, it's
Yeah.
it's part of the world they've established.
The enigmatic universe. Cinematic egg universe.
Synegmatic.
Enigmatic universe.
Now, what I am really enjoying here is being able to see their ability to create different character designs and faces. Like the two doctors or whoever the character is with the unibrow, like I kind of really like that unibrow guy's design with the little beady eyes and whatever else is going there. Everybody seems to have a favorite panel from this, but my favorite panel is when the doctor is claiming he's the world's greatest doctor and he can't heal a few egg wounds. Like, I love that panel.
Greatest doctor in his humble opinion.
Yeah.
And when he's like, heal, all right, be prepared, sicko. Like, wait, what's he going to do? Is he going to beat up his sick patient? Like, what was he running to do there? He's like, oh, you're not going to heal, huh? I'll help you heal better by punching you. I don't know.
Well, he did wake up from the coma because of that.
Well, he woke up from the insult.
Weak!
And
according to
I feel like this recurring thing, which I feel like other people have pointed this out before, this very void-like feeling of there are these randos that Egg Dealer meets that also happen to be very powerful fighters or hand-to-hand combatants in their own right. Like in their intro comic, they randomly like try to turn this person into an egg, and they're like, oh no, this person is a very strong fighter. I have to take them down. And here we have randomly the world's greatest doctor, who is also a powerful hand-to-hand combatant.
Yeah.
That is the thing with the Egg Dealer comics, is that there is a great deal of energy and like dynamic flow going on, and I think that's why a lot of people like these comics so much. There's just a lot of free like energy going on here, very dynamic. Even if a lot of it isn't like on a technical level, doesn't work. Like the backgrounds need more work, and I think kind of what Arts was saying, that if you exaggerate the backgrounds to kind of match the exaggerated proportions of your character, it would kind of work in a unified way. What I don't like is the blurry effects for like the egg gas or like some of the shine effects. That sort of loose, smudgy, whatever. It's distracting. It doesn't work compared to the sort of anime CG style you have going on with the shading of the characters. And that is something that a lot of like early digital artists do. So that's something to try and move away from. Otherwise, you keep doing you. And now I hand it off to Yarn before she like explodes.
Explodes. First off, full disclosure to everybody. I don't care if it's canon or not. The Egg Dealer is my husbando.
I am judging you so hard right now.
There's just something so free and wonderful about all the comics that Boogie makes, and I don't know. It's so nice. It's so wonderful. And of course, you're right. Everybody does have a favorite from them. My favorite one is at the bottom right of page 12, where he's kind of like dancing and saying nature's little perfection. Definitely my favorite one. It just seems so happy. It's kind of how I sum up the Egg Dealer. He's just happy. But yeah, this whole thing is a fantastic trip from beginning to end, and I can't, like, other than just technical stuff really, and maybe making the colors a little bit more cohesive sometimes, it's just fun, I can't be upset about it. I do like that they definitely don't suffer from same face at all. You're right. That is wonderful, because a lot of people fall into that trap, like, I have to make my characters super aesthetic. And they're just not even worried about it. They're like, these are some people, and this is how they are. Like, I want them to teach me. I need Boogie to teach me how to art.
I mean, there are definitely on Void a lot of different opinions about the Egg Dealer.
Oh, sure.
But I can also see what the appeal is as well.
Yeah, I think it's just there's an innocence to it,
Yeah, it's so free, and I just envy their ability to just do so much.
You can tell that they're having fun with it, and I feel like, especially from like comments that we get from some other people on here, or even when we're talking Discord, after a certain point, what you're working on, yes, we all love what we do, but there's a point where it's still, I've got to finish it, and then it becomes a slight bit of a chore. And I don't see any of that in this. And, I might be wrong. I might just be assuming or projecting, but I don't know, it just feels so nice.
Well, we all know Sumiko is stuck in the Eggverse forever now.
Not forever. I mean, I have some plans. I'm working on it. I was actually really happy to lose.
I see so much potential in Boogie. I'm just seeing all of these really extreme and unique angles, and they use a lot of extreme foreshortening as well. And I think some of it comes across as just like not understanding the basics of anatomy, but a lot of it is just intentionally stretching the limits of how things can look in reality. And I think that with some more practice, getting used to a really solid understanding of anatomy, you can take that and combine it with your extreme foreshortening and crazy angles and kind of bending and twisting characters in ways that they wouldn't be able to do in real life, and have it look a lot more intentional and look more like a strategy instead of just not understanding how to draw proportions correctly or whatever.
Just what Arts was suggesting earlier about Grappler Baki. Grappler Baki is a lot like that. It is very like high in technical and anatomical detail, but the body proportions are so weird in that comic.
Yeah, they like basically that artist knows anatomy so well that they're able to make it more ridiculous and add muscles where they aren't and make it look like if those muscles did exist, that is how they would work.
Wasn't Crow Marty High School another one of those like really ridiculous ones?
Crow Marty was weird because it was like a mix of things. It was like a weird contrast between highly proficient art and ridiculous stuff.
Oh, so the jarringness came from the technical skill versus the subject matter.
Well, there's different character types. There's like a character who looks like Freddie Mercury, and there's a robot who looks like a tin can. And then there's like characters who are drawn very like straightforward and realistic.
Yeah, whereas in like Baki, all the characters are like, they're extremely over the top and unrealistic.
Right.
But they look anatomically correct if that was real.
But yeah, I think Baki is a great example that Boogie can look at, because I love the distortion and the extreme techniques that they're using here. And I want to see that pushed to a point where everyone can see the care and the creativity that's been put into that, instead of some people thinking of it as just, not being able to draw well or whatever.
You know who else does that on Void? I mean, they're not very active now, but Peter V was always very good at that.
Yeah.
And like, he pressed his style so hard that it just became like, I don't think anybody can actually replicate it.
Yeah, and it makes his work very easily recognizable, which I think is another thing that's going on really well here, is Boogie's pushing their character design and everything to a level that it's immediately apparent that it's their artwork. So practice your anatomy, get that really solid, and use that to make your extreme proportions, angles, foreshortening, everything look very intentional and like almost realistic, while at the same time being completely fantastical and impossible. This comic is hilarious. I think the only other thing I have to say is that this comic gives me more questions than answers. And I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but I feel like it's kind of the beauty of Boogie's madness, and it makes me want to see more. So you did a good job there.
That was actually my thought when I finished reading it too. I was like, I don't feel like anything was answered, but we got more story.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to Disarmed, Caps Lock, and Shift by Evie. It's a quiet evening as Caps Lock chats on the phone, making small talk, until he's interrupted by Shift, whose forearm was broken from the rest of his body. Turns out the damage from his encounter with Tiga, the catfolk goddess possessing Nyasu, was worse than he thought, and he needs further repairs. In a quiet moment of concern, Caps Lock asks if Shift wants to talk about the experience, and why he shot Nyasu in the first place. Shift brushes it off, saying he's fine. As he exits the apartment, Shift mentions that this isn't the first time he's almost killed someone, and leaves Caps Lock to worry alone.
Before this comic, I saw the Caps Lock and Shift comics, and this comic was the one that got me more invested in their storyline. They were a cool character, but I wasn't necessarily invested in their storyline like I am now after having read this one. Now I'm more interested to see what happens and to see more of what's going on behind, Shift being a lot less hinged than he seems to be. So that's good development. In terms of the tone, I really like the tone, and I'm now invested in the story. In terms of the pacing, there was something about the ending. It felt like it ended in the middle of Caps Lock's reaction to Shift leaving. I think maybe if the bottom left panel was potentially moved to the bottom right, it might not feel the same way. Or if there was a small dialogue bubble, that might not, or even just one more panel, because this pacing to me, it felt like it happened too quickly after Shift leaving for it to be the full reaction, and it felt like this was the middle of his reaction. But other than that, I enjoyed the comic and want more.
Now, Eevee is one of my favorites on the site. I'm always very excited to see when they do comics, and I always feel that it's rare because usually they show up for like events and not really a lot of regular battling. So this is sort of a rare treat. I feel like a random BB that's not connected to an event that's actually following up on a story that we've been seeing them develop. So I'm very much enjoying that. You know, I love Onion Princess. I love Caps Lock and Shift. Though on a side note, I've noticed that they've never used a little cat character. Tab, I believe, is their character name. That character has never come into play in the stories, though they exist. But otherwise, yeah, I actually very much enjoyed this comic. Like I said, I enjoyed that it's a follow-up and that we're getting a little more development. And we actually got a little bit of a hint of the character's background that, you know, when they were like, you think this is the first time I've almost like killed somebody? So Shift continues to be a more interesting and developing character because we know that they basically always hide their demeanor. I think it's been established that like while they have their human face, the human face is more or less expressionless compared to when it falls off. The robotic face actually has a lot of expressions, and they really are kind of like a dick. They really are like an asshole. And we're getting a little bit more here that, you know, they have a sort of dark gritty past that is being hinted at. But what's also kind of sad to me is we also don't have a lot to go on as far as Caps Lock. Caps Lock's always been like the sort of like fun, like sort of level-headed character, the straight man to Shift's like puns and such. But at the same time, I would like to see more development of Caps Lock's character and their own sort of background and feelings. Because even like during the last comic, when they were defending Jiko in the aquarium, it seemed like they were getting ready to do stuff, like they were getting ready defensive, but the reaction was still like subdued. And, you know, I would just like to see more development. So I feel like we'll see that with more comics, especially if you continue down this path. So I would love to see more comics. And it's funny because it's hard to keep straight in my head since they've done so many collaborations now with Jiko, which storyline is actually Jiko's and which one's actually Caps Locks and Shifts, or if those both count as canon to both of you guys because they've collaborated. But I love them both, and I love the way they interact. So yeah, good job.
I feel like the writing and everything was effective because at the end of it, I definitely want more, but I think like that silent panel at the end still confuses me. Like my brain says something else needs to be there, and because there's not something there, I know that I need more. And I feel like that's intentional, but it's still, like, again, it still confuses me.
I feel that it's intentional. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I think my brain is just not used to it, especially since, like, for me, some of the critiques I've got are like, you can't leave things open-ended like that. You have to give us reactions. Like, since I've been on Void, so now I'm like trying to parse that with what I've learned, and what I'm seeing, and how it's being effective as opposed to what I've been doing.
I think the part of the issue is not necessarily the silentness of it, but how quickly it comes after Shift leaving. Because Shift leaves in the third to last panel with the click, and we only have the two reactions of Caps Lock, and I think there needs to be like another panel or something of Caps Lock's reaction, because it's not necessarily that it's open-ended, it just feels like it's in the middle of the reaction, and not the final part of Caps Lock's reaction.
Okay.
So yeah, so maybe that could have been framed differently, actually. Like maybe that panel we get of their face, that confused expression they sort of have, that could actually be the final panel if you rearranged it to the opposite side.
Yeah, anyway, I mean, it's still fantastic. Evie always does fantastic work, so, like, I don't have really, like, it's just always nice to see them on the site. When they're able to visit, it's nice.
I actually like having the last panel where it is, but our conversation does make me think about how in comics, generally, the bigger you make a panel, the more time it's supposed to take up. And looking at this page, that panel is I guess it's the biggest on the page, but not by a ton. And the two panels before it are both the smallest on the page. So in a sense, it ends up making it feel like these series of panels with Shift leaving are taking kind of a solid beat each. And then those two panels of the door closing and Caps Lock's confused expression go by really fast. And then it just stops on him. standing there.
It does seem to be correct. Like, because they're overlapping, they're suggesting that it's happening within the same sequence of time.
Yeah.
So those reactions are either happening like simultaneously or very quickly.
Yeah. So I think just leaving that last panel bigger and more open can help feel like a moment trapped in time, that even though it's a single panel, there's a certain amount of time passing of Caps Lock just sitting there staring at the door, thinking about what's just happened.
I think I know maybe something, because now I'm looking at it again, and I think the third panel on that, where it's just Shift walking to the door, I think that could be combined with the fourth panel, where while Shift is walking to the door, they could have said that line of, "This isn't the first time I've almost killed someone either." Then just one panel of the "I'll see you later" Caps Lock, and then giving more space to the door closing, and giving more space to the face shot, and making that last panel bigger. That might be how to work it, because the third panel is the weakest here and doesn't seem to, it's big and doesn't really add enough compared to all the other panels.
I would kind of disagree with that, because what that panel adds is that Shift is being really quiet and he's kind of withholding stuff from the conversation. And then after thinking it over for a minute, he adds the sort of aside like, "Oh, this isn't the first time I've almost killed someone. See ya." It creates the sense of beat of him silently walking away instead of immediately sharing this thought.
Well, here's my suggestion, actually. Here's what I think would work. I think it would actually work if there were an extra panel there in the middle. Like, we get Shift walking towards the door, then we get just one silent panel of their back, and then have them, say their line of, "This isn't the first time I've almost killed someone," because at least that would space it out and give us a pregnant pause where they're kind of thinking about it, and then they're like, "Okay, I'm going to admit this thing." So I think actually an extra panel there would help punctuate that moment.
Something I just noticed, because we were focusing on that panel, is from the second panel on that page to the third panel. His bag switches arms. So that, and then the last panel, other than just the silence that's trying to be conveyed, if the thing is to make them feel shut out, I think it might have been more effective for that shut out if it was just the door and them now they've got a lot to think on. Although the stark loneliness of the apartment also helps. I'm always into mood, and it's here. I just think it can be pushed.
Yeah, I think the moments need more time to breathe by themselves, and I think it's an issue of layout and paneling.
Yeah.
So there are different ways you could approach it, basically.
Yeah.
And it would just take more experimentation.
Yeah, overall, I think this comic was just really well done, and I appreciate the focus on that timing and mood. I think you did a really good job, and hopefully some of those suggestions are helpful going forward.
Yeah, and also I want to see more of this story.
Yes, definitely. All right, on to our last comic.
Retribution!
Dun dun dun.
Asylum has demanded ownership of the new Void City space elevator in exchange for their continued cooperation in the Retribution campaign. As leaders of New Void City discuss the tactical and political ramifications of handing over the elevator, Irina bursts out in anger, decrying the hypocrisy in fighting the lawless with PR efforts and other passive political means. She begins to leave, determined to take back the old docks on her own instead of remaining passive. Anvil manages to talk her down, and she leaves in a huff. Caleb, the Vectran Prime Counselor, notes the careful balance Irina creates by discouraging lawless who fear her power. He receives a notification on his phone and leaves to find Serena Cizal, a reporter who has been promised information that will blow Retribution wide open. Knowing he has the upper hand, Caleb shares his true intentions with Serena. The prison in space is indeed developing technology to strip metas of their powers permanently. The Vectrans have decided that humans have failed to keep peace, and that the only way is to remove meta powers and put the Vectrans in control of the world, leading from the shadows. He leaves Serena with a cleanly wiped memory, then makes a call to Veronica Nightingale. As they discuss Irina's approach toward a breaking point, we see her quietly mourning her feelings of powerlessness and isolation.
I love when a comic is monotone with the limited colors. I love that style. It just works really well. Limited color stuff is my jam, and Pirates did really good on this. And the entire thing was like, they said it was like done in a week or something, and it's really good for all done in a week. And also the final shot, just bringing it back, like referencing Ghost in a Shell, that is like super fitting for Arena's situation. And the only crit I have is just the light and the dark should have been made more extreme. Because since it referenced Ghost in the Shell, I went to actually look up that specific scene it was referencing. And in that scene, you can only see the white of the window, the outlines of the city, a bit of the bed, and a silhouette of Major in that. So I think that works better than what Pyrus has, where it's like all the grays. It should have been made more extreme like that. In that shot in Ghost in the Shell, where it's just blinding white with the silhouette, that gets a better feeling of them being sort of like trapped by their duty to the city, which is what I feel is also super fitting for Arena in this situation, where they're sort of trapped by their duty to the city and it's consuming everything else. So, because the like little cabinet and the doorway in the room doesn't add much, I feel like it should be mostly like have gone blacked out. But other than that, I like this comic a lot.
It feels like cheating that Pyrrhus isn't actually here. Did you plan this, Pyrrhus? Did you plan for us to talk about your comic while you weren't here?
I bet.
But yeah, so Retribution as a whole has been an interesting experiment. I'm curious as to where it's all going to end up going. And I know Pyrrhus really loves all the lore and canon stuff. So it's a really ambitious comic in and of itself, and trying to do all that. It's interesting, too, that he's been experimenting lately with the long form, the infinite canvas style. The thing is, since he's balancing so much information, I'm not fond of the word balloon placement. Like, just looking at it, it looks so cluttered. There's just so many word balloons going on. And because you're kind of using the infinite canvas, I feel like you could have spaced that out way better. Because, I mean, you've got the room to do that. So that's something to keep in mind, especially because there's so much like information dump going on. I'm also not entirely sure what to make of the Vectrin revelation. I mean, there were several revelations going on here. I'm not sure if it was previously established that people didn't know that the Vectrins were aliens. Because this comic establishes that people think they're the same as like elves or whatever, that they're some sort of Earthborn race. And it turns out that something happened to their home planet, and now they're on Earth, and they want to control everything from the shadows.
Yeah, there was a previous comic that established some sort of mass rewriting of people's memories to make it seem like the Vectrins were there always, as a way to create peace without, having to like fight the Vectrins off, because they had killed people to take over their bodies. But at the same time, I can't remember all of the details, but it was kind of a compromise made so that they could continue to live peacefully among humans.
So I think like that should have been like there's already a lot of story, even with their story so far going on the first page. But that kind of detail probably would have also been helpful as well. Yeah, I think it was a pretty good and ambitious experiment in of itself. And I think it's definitely what the Retribution needs. Like, it needs that sort of guiding hand of someone trying to pull all the loose ends together. Yeah, I think this is a very good point as to where the story is heading and where it's heading for like everybody. Because it's obvious you're moving all the big players into position. Arena's doing her thing. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. I do find it weird that the Vectrin guy didn't just straight up kill the reporter and just make her disappear. But, that's sort of a personal preference kind of thing, I guess.
I love this comic a lot, only because, I know some people think that there's a lot of words in it, but all of those words continue to guide you through the comic with little to no issue, making sure you've got everything in the order that it needs to be. And it's fantastic. Like, everything just flows. I can watch everything, every interruption, like when Karen interrupts, or just like the sound effect overlapping. All of this is really fantastic and effective, and it feels like a lot of thought got put into it. And the text is tight where the tension is. It's more spaced out when it's not. It's got really good pacing. It's got such a mood to it, and I always like any of the political issues. I like those big plots. I know people say Void has no canon and it doesn't matter, but I love when this stuff comes up. It is like, I
actually went back through some of the comics that Pyrus mentioned are worth reading to get background information on this. I haven't been keeping up super well with really comics in general recently on Void. So I've missed a lot of what's been going on with Retribution. But it's really fun to go back and see all the storylines that have been flowing together, even though, like we said, there is no set canon on Void and you don't follow what anyone else does. It's fun to collaborate on this grand scale and make things like political movements and gang wars and everything happen.
Ooh, gang wars.
Hopefully we can get more of those too. I miss the days of Cockrockers versus Hazard Theater.
That sounds hilarious.
So I super appreciate, even though I went back and read those comics, it's still super helpful to have that summary on the first page. Because especially since the comics that are part of Retribution take place in various characters' comic archive instead of all in one character's comic archive, it's really hard to find all of them, even if you're looking for. So I really appreciate that summary.
Now's a good time to plug playlists.
If anyone doesn't know, when you go to a comic match page, on the right-hand side is a little box that says Add to Playlist. And you can create your own playlist of comics that you can reorder or just have a collection of comics that you want other people to look at. And if you go to the comics tab in the menu bar, you can click on playlists and see what other people have created. So it's really useful for keeping timelines straight when they happen across different characters' comics, or to just keep track of your favorite comics or a specific event in comic history that you liked. So definitely take a look at those if you don't know about them already.
Gotta get that achievement.
Yeah, and if anyone wasn't aware already, achievements are a thing now. So take a look at your forum profile and let me know if there are any achievements that you should have that you don't, because we've had a few bugs that I'm still working out. I also want to echo that it's cool that you're exploring this infinite canvas feel. I feel like you do a really good job of it. There is a lot of speech bubbles. I think it's kind of just germane to the kind of comic this is. It's very expository in combination with starting out with this political meeting, and then it's a lot of people talking to each other, and there's really no way to get around that. So I think you did a really good job of breaking up the speech bubbles in ways that make them more readable. And like, I never got lost while reading these speech bubbles. They all flow nicely from one to another and are sectioned off in ways that help keep my eyes in the right place. I really love what you're doing with Retribution, and I'm really excited to see what comes next, both in your comics and any other Retribution comics people decide to create. And also, I miss Miller, and it's a shame that he got killed.
He's not really dead.
He's kind of
just
dead.
at the bottom of the ocean somewhere. He can't be dead. I mean, he's not like comic dead. He can always come back, right? As long as the sharks haven't got him.
There is that hope. Like, since he's not void dead, maybe he can come back. I don't know. And maybe Pyrus is planning something. Maybe not.
I hold out hope. I want to see the drama that comes back from Miller's return. Like, it would just mess so many people up, and I want that chaos back in Void. You know how many more comics would show up? Do you know how many more comics would happen if Miller returned?
Comics as well as a lot of ship art.
Yes, a lot of ship art.
There's always ship art.
There would be more. There would be a lot more.
You weren't here back in Miller's heyday.
No, I wasn't.
He was like the most shippable bachelor of Void.
Isn't it because he like transforms and mine does...
he's just got mid-2000s goth teen aesthetic. And there are ladies here of a certain age who, I'm just saying.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what comes next, and hopefully a lot more people jump on Retribution and continue to push it forward.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
I want to. I don't have any characters that are bad or good enough.
I don't have any yet, and Catador is now coming before Sirius Moonlight, so it'll be a little while.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening to VCast, our special pirate episode.
Make more comics.
Comment on more comics also.
We have been discussing a lot of things and rolling out a lot of different features. So keep paying attention. There's more stuff on the way, more stuff we're constantly arguing about. I want to plug in VoidTube. VoidTube was Desi's concept, so I want to give her the credit for that. I just wanted to make it a reality. So if you've got a video, speed draw, music, anything Void related you want to add, send that over. Let's put that on the VoidTube. Show people, that we're a cool, hip community.
Yep.
Cool and hip for me to say that, right?
Yeah. Cool and hip are the coolest and hippest words.
We should probably also have like a community tutorial on how to do recordings of that stuff.
Yeah,
sure.
If anyone wants to make that would be great.
I've still got to figure out how to get my microphone not disabled anymore on my computer before I can do any of that stuff.
Arts, where can people find you?
You can find me Don Void on Discord. On Instagram, I have the same name. I'm also on Twitter and Tumblr, but really it's all just cross posts from Instagram, so that's the one to probably follow. Same name, Arts and Goodies.
All right. William Duell, where can we find you?
I swear I'll be there by the moon and the stars. I'll be there. Mostly I just use Instagram, so William Duell on Instagram is basically where to find me, though right now you're going to see a lot of food pictures. We'll get to the art soon.
That's why I unfollowed you. Sorry.
You bastard. You son of a bitch.
Yarn, where can people find you?
I am yarn_, which I think on Instagram. I also own yarnwitch outright, but I just got locked out of it for a few years, and now I'm too invested in the other one. And yarn_witch on Twitter, yarnwitch no underscore on Tumblr, and that's it. And I don't update any of those, so good luck following me.
You can find me at Cuteapoot, CUTEAPOOT, and I am on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Pinterest, and kind of like Arts. Those are all just cross posts from Instagram.
Quick aside, in the character building Discord, Mr. PR just put a thing about how characters' names are pronounced. So Doana's not actually Doana, it's Donna or something like that.
Donna?
So,
What?
yeah, no, so
This destroyed our theory
destroyed
entirely.
destroyed the theory.
Okay, we gotta erase this. We gotta erase this VCast and start over.
Start from the top.
You know what's great is that nothing is canon on Void, so it doesn't matter.
And besides, it's in the Discord, so we'll just pretend that we'll go with our
Just edit
theory.
all of that out.
Yes. But I just thought it was funny that happened at this exact time we're doing
Yeah,
this.
it is
Someone's a spy.
Donna!
All right. Thank you all for joining, and stay tuned next week for a real VCast, the non-pirate version.
The pure Pyrus one.
Yeah, all pirates all the
Now with
time.
100% more pirates.
When I was just a lad, looking for my true vocation, my father said, "Now, son, this choice deserves deliberation. Though you could be a doctor, or perhaps a financier, my boy, why not consider a more challenging career?"
Hey ho ho, you'll cruise the foreign shores.
See
and
you,
you'll
lads.
keep your mind and
Show 'em
body
you've been
sound by
practicing.
working out of doors.
True friendship and adventure are what we can't live without.
And when you're a professional pirate,
That's what the job's about. Upstage, lads. This is my only number. Now take Sir Francis.